Hi, everyone. I'm so excited. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast and YouTube channel. So in this episode, we are talking to Caroline Sumners, who is the CEO of Empower Academic Coaching, which is a company that works with students of all ages with various questions about learning. So from how do I cope in class with ADHD to how do I write a successful letter for my university application, Caroline covers all of it. So today I can't wait because we are tapping into Caroline's wealth of knowledge around a few of these key topics. And before I forget, if you hear Caroline mention executive functions at all, she is talking about, because I didn't know, she is talking about time management, planning, organizational skills, and self-control, just to name a few. So it's those types of functions that we're talking about. All right, Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. Can you tell us about Empower Academic Coaching? Like what caused you to start it up? How does it work?
So, I am a former teacher. I taught middle school science and English and high school biology. And in my last year teaching, I had a group of middle schoolers, seventh graders, who I would see twice a day, which was unusual for my school. Most of the teachers just saw them for one class per day. But because I was able to teach them science and English, I saw them twice as much. And you learn a lot about kids when you get to spend more time with them. So I noticed I had this particular group of students who were so insightful, curious, smart, like really made great connections. But then there was no evidence of that on their report card. And some of the other teachers who saw them maybe for just one class a day would say, oh, they're like not living up to their potential. They're not really motivated. They're unfocused in class. They are distracting other students. And I got really curious about that disparity. So that's when I first started learning about executive function skills, which you did a great job of explaining what those are. And collectively, I kind of think of them as the how of learning. And
Mm,
as a teacher, I mean, as your listeners know, and as you know from your career, there's
yeah,
just not enough time in the day to do everything that you want to accomplish as a teacher. So I really felt that I had to focus on the what of learning. I had to actually teach them the science, teach them the English skills they were learning. But in terms of how to learn, I felt like, first of all, there wasn't enough time. And second of all, shouldn't they know this stuff already? Like how to
that's what a lot of
study.
teachers think, I think. Shouldn't they know this already?
Yeah, especially by the time they got to middle school, I was thinking this would be something that they had covered. But I mean, maybe sometimes if you just happen to get a teacher who prioritizes that.
True.
But what I found, at least in my areas, there was no collective effort to teach those skills to students in a traditional school setting. So I decided, well, someone's got to teach them.
Yeah.
Let me try. And so a few of them would come into school in the mornings before class started. And I just started from the basics. Things like, let's put the week on the whiteboard and let's talk about all your classes, not just the ones you have with me. Okay, if you've got a math test coming up on Friday, what do you need to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to help you go into Friday prepared and confident, ready to do your best? And breaking that down even further. So a lot of people would be like, well, yeah, you just have to study
Yeah.
for the test on Friday. But those kids didn't know what that meant. So sometimes that would mean, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they would really put a lot of effort into it, but it would be ineffective techniques, like just reading over their math problems again. And what we actually know is most effective for for a math test where you have to solve problems to get the correct answer, the best thing you can practice is actually solving more problems. So we would talk about how to do that, how to check that your answer was correct, effective ways to study with your friends and quiz each other. So in that process, they were actually learning a lot of different skills at once. They were learning how to set goals, plan, organize, and study. And I figured if these kids really benefited from it, that others would as well. So I took that chance. I decided to transition to working as an academic coach full time in my business. So I left the classroom, and it's been an amazing experience for the past 6 years. We've worked with hundreds of students, we've collaborated with schools, and I'm so proud of the results that we've accomplished. And I've still been able to do my favorite part of teaching, which is working with kids to help them achieve their dreams.
Yeah, I especially like the idea of, giving them the vocabulary that they need. Like, what kind of questions do you need to be asking yourself before you set up a study plan? Or, what does it look like if I have to study? How do I do that? So that they're actually able to process the thinking behind it as well. Because let's face it, teachers are actually not taught how to teach study skills. Teachers study based on the way their parents taught them to study. And sometimes parents didn't have great study skills. So then where does the student go, right? And I want, I think it's so important for students to understand that no one is born knowing how to study. This is something anybody can learn as long as you have the right tools behind you, right? So I think that's fantastic. What are some of the trends like that you are seeing? 'Cause you've been doing this now for 6 years. What are some of the trends you're seeing today that parents and teachers should keep an eye out for?
I think it won't be any surprise to your listeners that I see mental health and loneliness and anxiety as big concerns for especially young people today, but honestly, everyone.
Mm.
Um, so I think that teachers are uniquely equipped to help students with this because we are that additional person who's part of their village, who's not their parent. And so just connecting with kids can do so much to protect their mental health. There's a book that I love called Equity Centered Trauma Informed Education by Alex Chevron Vanette. And one thing that really stuck with me in that book is how it talks about that the number and quality of adult relationships that kids have has a really protective mental health effect. So we can be those adults for kids, helping them know that they do have someone that they can talk to. They don't have to suffer alone. They can be open with us about their challenges. Like you were just saying, some of those questions, they may seem simple and easy to us, but for a kid who's struggling in a class and who may feel like their teacher doesn't like them or they're never going to be good at this, that has a lot of impact on their identity. And if we can be there to help them process through those questions, that can do so much to helping them feel really connected and like people care. And people do. It's just about us really showing them that so that they have no question in their minds about that. I
If
think another,
Sorry, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, if, with regards to mental health, if there isn't because I know there are a lot of schools, as far as I believe, that don't have counselors necessarily. So if a school is not equipped with counseling services, what advice, like, would you tell the parents sort of to just keep an eye on if you notice any shifts in the child's behavior? Would you look for a free counseling service or just encourage them to talk to someone? Or what would you say in regards to kind of catching a mental health issue before it gets too bad?
Yeah, I think those are all great ideas. And I think one really powerful tool that we have as adults is modeling.
Mhm.
So really like making sure that kids know that these conversations are okay to have so that they have some sort of frame of reference for, oh, my parent has talked to me about their own feelings, about stress and how they deal with it. I know that I could go to them if I wanted to talk to them about it. I think also helping kids think through all the resources they have. That's something I love to do with my own students because sometimes they'll say that they're maybe going through something and I'll ask, is that something you want to share? And they might say, no, I just wanted to let you know I'm going through something today. And I'll always ask, do you have someone that you can talk to about it?
Okay.
And if they don't, if then what we'll do is brainstorm together some different people in their life that they could go to. And so that can be a way that you can support your child or your student if they're not sure who to go to, helping them realize there are a lot of resources in their life, whether that's family members, coaches, people who the adults who run the clubs that they're a part of. And then we can be those people as well, modeling our own process. So I think that's something that teachers can do is, I think talk about it in a healthy way. Like, here's something that I do when I'm feeling overwhelmed by all of the great lessons that I want to prepare for you all. One thing that I do is write it all out. Let me show you what I do. Let's go ahead and do that with your week, or even just ask them, what are some things that are stressful for you all right now? And then you can kind of pick up on those patterns and think about ways that you can help. So I want to be cautious there because teachers are helpers. We have big hearts. And you may think, like, if you're asking them what they're stressed about and they tell you a bunch of things, that you're going to have to somehow like want to solve all of those things. And you don't have to do that. Like, you are their educator, you have a lane to stay in, but you may get some clues about ways that you can help. So, for example, if they're saying that they're really stressed about a project they have in your class, that can be a clue to you about, okay, let's have a conversation about this and see what we can do here to lighten the load. Is it that the instructions are confusing? Is the deadline not making sense anymore? Because one thing that can be difficult as a teacher is knowing exactly how much time it's going to take a student to do something, because it takes us so much less time to do that task. So I think that curiosity can go a long way towards letting students know that it's safe to talk about when they're struggling.
Yeah, and I think definitely, teacher doesn't necessarily have to fix an issue, or like if the students all kind of comment on what they're struggling with, but just making them aware that talking about it is the best thing they can do. So even if, like, to not hold it in, getting it through to them, because back in like my parents' generation, even when I was growing up, you didn't talk about problems. You didn't talk, you just didn't. Like, it just wasn't if you had anything deemed close to mental health, it was like you were the problem. And I feel like at least now it's more open in terms of discussion. And I think just getting it through to students that no matter what is bothering you, talk to someone about it, because you need to get it out in order to start like the healing process, and especially if it's trauma based, right? So yeah, I definitely feel if the teacher does what you said, like just opens it up, just and says, this is what I do, if I'm highly stressed. I'm a big fan of also teaching the kids breath work, which I wish I had done more often. Did you ever do that when you were teach the kids like box breathing or any type of breath work?
Definitely. And we would also sometimes have little like peace breaks where they could choose something that would help them feel more peaceful. So that could be like some, gentle movement or stretching, or doing a kind of breathing exercise. And I definitely think that's so powerful to equip kids with those tools, because breathing is something that you can do in any scenario practically.
Yep.
And it doesn't draw attention to yourself. It's something that kids can do during the school day, even if there's a teacher who's not saying, okay, now we're going to do breath work. Like, once they know that, that's a tool that they can carry with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a forever tool, definitely, and by introducing more and more tools, I think the students will also learn, oh, I like this. I don't like this so much. This doesn't work as well for me, but this works great, right? So it's like anything, you trial and error a lot of different tools. And I know sometimes teachers might say, oh, but you've got to get through the curriculum and all of that. And I'm like, these days, those kids are passing. So my whole thing is they need the mental health, the struggle is real when it comes to the coping mechanisms with the world today, because they are exposed to everything that is going on in the world. You wake up and it's just like doom and gloom, especially if you've trained your algorithm on all your social media that way. And I feel by giving them the coping mechanisms of what is in their control, what they can do, you are actually helping that student in so much more in the long run than some of the academic things that you might have to cover, which could be done on Google, and they will tell you that as it is as well. So I think taking the pausing your lessons, like you've said you did. Were there any other things that you did in your class that you saw kind of really resonated with the students that they really liked?
In terms of helping them with their mental health.
Yeah, in terms, yeah, things that, yeah, help with their mental health.
I think one thing that I do now that I wish I had done more of as a teacher is I start every single session with my students asking for their high, low, and cheer. So a high point of their day or week, a low point, and then a thank you to someone.
I love that.
Uh, yeah, I know that that really resonates with a lot of what you teach about mindset. And obviously, as a teacher, you don't have time to do that with every single kid every day, but building in some time for that one-on-one connection is really powerful. And getting to connect, it just takes a few moments to maybe check in with, set a goal of 2 students per day that you do that sort of check in with, or use it as an attendance question. Think about a creative, or it could even be a ticket out the door that students write down those things on a slip of paper and hand it to you. I guarantee you will learn so much from that.
Mm.
And one thing that I did do as a teacher is I would try to build in, I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but basically coaching time. So this was hard to do, but it was well worth it. Basically, I would figure out what are some activities where kids could be working primarily independently so that I could, within a class period, have time to talk to about 5 students for about 10 minutes each. And I would do a rotation so that by the end of the month or 6 weeks, I would be able to have a 10-minute conversation with each student. And that sounds small, but it's so much more than what we can typically do if we
Right.
don't intentionally set aside that time. And I really loved those conversations because it did give me that time to connect. It gave them time to share things with me that I never would have found out otherwise, just about what are their dreams, their goals, their passions. We talked about their goals for the class. We talked about what they were enjoying the most about school. We were talking about the difficulties they were facing. And more than the information that I got from them, they also got a chance to just share in a way that they normally wouldn't be able to. So I think looking for those creative ways to have that time to really connect
Yeah.
is the fun part of teaching. And I get that it does require like thinking a little bit differently and planning ahead and structuring things, but honestly, that's why most of us got into teaching, is
Yeah.
because we love kids and want to have those conversations. So that has got to be a high priority.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. I'm definitely I'm going to call my friend who teaches grade 7 right after this and tell her, I'm like, this is brilliant. You've got to do this. I want to tap into your knowledge, Caroline, about ADHD students, because I feel like you have done a lot more, maybe studying on them, like you've worked with a lot of those students, in Empower Academic Coaching. So tell me what you were telling me before when we talked earlier in the week. Like, can you explain what's the difference in their brains, and also touching on masking, or even just like what should we know as teachers and parents of ADHD students?
I think one of the most important things to know is that ADHD is a real brain difference, and it's not all negative. There's lots of positives that come with ADHD. And at the same time, it is something that the person with ADHD was born with, and it's not something that is in any way a personal failing or a lack of effort. So, a lot of the behaviors that we see from students with ADHD will lead to adults saying things like, oh, well, they're really unfocused. They never remember things. They must not care. We make assumptions based on those behaviors. If we see a kid who we've told 3 times to take out the trash and we watch them walk right by the trash can, you can jump to a lot of conclusions. You can say, they're ignoring me, they're being defiant, they don't care, they don't want to contribute to this family. Or we can see the same thing in school. If you tell a student that they need to pay attention to what you're saying, and then you see them like looking around the room, messing with something else, reading a book, like talking to the person next to them, you can make an assumption that they don't care about how they do in the class. They don't care about their future. They're unmotivated. Nothing could be further from the truth. There are documented brain differences that we're continuing to learn about more each day, but there's something in their brain that makes those things more difficult. It makes some things easier. For example, those same people who may get accused of those things can be intensely passionate. Many entrepreneurs have ADHD because they have great big picture vision. They have an incredible ability to hyper focus on an important task. So they're the people who can swoop in an emergency and be calm under pressure and totally take care of things. Like, I don't know the stats on this, but I would guess emergency room doctors, that a lot of them may have ADHD because they're the people you want on your side in an emergency. And so some of those brain differences, again, it's something that we're learning a lot more about, but there's one that I think is really important to know about. So there's kind of 2 regions in the brain of different neurons that are connected. And one is called the task positive network. And I'm just going to call this the doer.
Okay.
So this is the part of your brain that is active when you are engaged in a task. So if you assign a student homework, they go sit at their desk, work on the homework, their task positive network, their doer is on. The other part is called the default mode network, because it's our default when we don't have a task. So I call this the dreamer. This is where we can kind of daydream, be creative. It's our mind wandering when we're not fully engaged in a task. And in a neurotypical brain, those things are opposite of each other. So when the doer is on, the dreamer is off. That's why you're able to get through a task without completely losing focus.
Right.
When the dreamer is on, the doer is off. So that's why, like, when you go for a walk or when you're in the shower, that's where you have your best ideas, because your
Right.
task positive network isn't on.
Makes sense.
In the ADHD brain, those things are on at the same time. So when they're engaged in a task, there's a lot of fighting that has to happen for them to not get totally distracted, because that dreamer side of the brain is also on. So it's not through a lack of effort that a student who needs to pay attention to a lecture is thinking about what they need to do that afternoon, or is remembering that they forgot their lunch that morning, or is noticing the ticking of the clock in the back and someone has gotten up to sharpen their pencil and they're watching that. And, oh, I just realized my friend, I'm not sure if I'm going home with them today. Like, I need to check right now. That is just how their brain is wired. And something that they can certainly learn strategies to deal with, but it's not something we can be upset with them about or just expect them to muscle through. That also comes with benefits. So that is why ADHDers can be so creative and come up with solutions to problems that other people aren't considering. Because if we're in a meeting trying to come up with a solution to a big problem, we are all probably in task positive mode if we're neurotypical, but an ADHDer can come in with that dreamer side of the brain also on and come up with something amazing. So I think at schools, and something that I try to do with my own students is we could really try to help them harness the power of that, the strength in that, and then help them with those more challenging aspects of ADHD.
Is there anything, I know I'm going to ask you this kind of in a second, but one strategy, like even as a parent that you would say, okay, try, this is something you would recommend if your child is ADHD? Like, is it like repeating instructions or sort of, is there anything they can do to help them? Or strategies? It's more like strategies I'm looking for. Is there a strategy you might know? Well, I'm sure you know a lot, but one that you could tell us about?
Definitely. And before strategies, I would even say my top strategy is for the other person. So that person may have ADHD too, because it has a strong genetic component. So if it runs in your family, but if you're neurotypical as well, I think the best thing to do is to go into it with that mindset of patience and curiosity, because ADHD is something we're still learning so much about. And even though there are some similarities, of course, in like how their brains may be wired and similarities in some of the characteristics, each person is also still an individual. So if this is your child, be educated about what ADHD is and what are some of the things you could look for and what are some of the strategies that have worked for others, but also acknowledge it's not a failure if you try a strategy with your child and it doesn't work. That just means they're an individual. And one thing that you can do is have conversations with them, especially as they get older, to try to get closer to what are the unique things that work for them. And that's going to help them so much, because then they know that if they try something and it doesn't work for them, it's not because of a personal failing. It's estimated that students with ADHD get about 20,000 more negative messages by age 12 than a student without. And this happens from a lifetime of being told, like, you just need to try harder. You just need to focus, like, sit still. What's wrong with you? You forgot your homework again. And it's like each of these is like a brick in what they call the wall of awful. It's just further confirmation that there is something wrong with them. So we have to really try hard to help them dismantle that wall and help them see that there is nothing wrong with them. There's just differences. So sometimes people will say, like, oh, you should just use a planner. And then the ADHDer will try that and they lose it, or it doesn't work for them. They can't remember to take it out and write things in it. And then they'll be just like, well, this strategy worked for others. It didn't work for me. It must be because of me. I think one thing that we can do as parents and educators is help them see, like, not everyone uses one way of doing things. Let's try different things until we find what works for you.
Right.
And then they know that it's all about options and trying and the process to finding what works for you.
Okay, yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, I agree. Definitely. It's trial and error for a lot of things in life, for sure. Don't like just give up after the first, like if something doesn't work, don't give up, right? Keep trying, keep looking for something different. And what exactly is masking when it comes to that? I know you were telling me about masking. What is that?
So because our society is set up really to honor the neurotypical brain, so think about a traditional school setting. And I know that there are schools that deviate from this, which is awesome. But in general, when you think of a school, it's going to be, there's loud bells to keep you going to class at the right time, crowded hallways.
Yeah.
Um, you have to sit in a desk, you have to like follow the instructions, you have to do things a certain way. You have to do things because someone in authority told you to. They might not give you like the reason behind it. You're just expected to do it. If you're late, there's a consequence. You might have to stay after school or get in trouble in some way. Um, that is an environment that really rewards conformity and compliance. And so that kind of forces people who might operate in an environment that's different to try to blend in because nobody wants to stick out and be different. So, what that leads to is someone with ADHD, for example, trying to appear that they're someone that they're not. So, if they are having trouble focusing on what the teacher is saying, they may learn, here are some things I can do to make it look like I'm paying attention. Like I'm going to focus on their chin so that I'm at least looking in the right direction. Or this can look like I know that I'm going to get in big trouble if I'm late. So I'm going to come up with like three different strategies to help me make sure that I'm definitely not late. And that sounds like, well, yeah, that's what everyone does. But for the ADHDer, if they're late, it's kind of like they're showing who they are. They're showing that they have a problem. And so it comes with a lot more anxiety
Yeah.
and a lot more, they're not able to operate in the way that they're able, their brain is asking them to operate. So it's really this conflict of who they are on the outside versus who they are on the inside, which, as you know, that's going to lead to a big problem in being able to have a positive mindset if you have that disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And tell me, is there any advice that you would give teachers today, like regarding what they might want to try and incorporate into the classroom to help students, and not even just students with ADHD necessarily, but yeah, but we can start there. What would you suggest for just students that are maybe struggling? What could teachers try?
I love this question because you're right. The strategies that work for students with ADHD are actually really effective strategies for everyone. When we start by thinking about the people who are most negatively impacted by our default mode, when we address those things from the beginning, actually everyone thrives. So even if you don't have a class of ADHDers, incorporating these things will lead to better results for your students, which is what I love about them.
Great.
They're just super impactful. So, one is what we've talked about already, to just really be positive and be that caring person in your student's life. And I already know that everyone listening is super caring and has a big heart for kids already. So I would just say to lean into that, because I know how it can be to have so many competing demands on your day and know that you have to like fill out this form and make a meeting with this instructional coach and get ready for your evaluation and all of these things. Just remembering that that is your number one job, is to be there for those students, will help you to prioritize even a few small things that you can do to help really connect with them. I think another thing is to prioritize choice and chances to pursue interests. So this is something that we all know already as teachers, but sometimes those are the things, like when you return to the basics, that's when you see the most impact. I actually did that with myself in my company this year, is I really got back to basics and recommitted to the things that I know work. And it's it's incredible how much of a difference that can really make. So I would encourage you to go back to some of your favorite lessons and see, what are the choices that I provide in terms of ways that students can learn, the the texts they can choose to read, or the way that they can present the information. Am I giving them enough choice in demonstrating how they've learned? Am I giving them choices to pursue their interests. I think ADHDers have an amazing hyper focus ability. So when they're really interested in something, they can focus on it forever and come up with something truly amazing. Are you giving them the chances to also make learning really relevant to them by getting to delve deep into a topic of interest?
Yeah, that is so true because one of my best sellers on my Teachers Pay Teacher store is my book report choice board. So it's like a digital board, but it has like 23 different ways the students can present a book that they're reading either together or separately, like if you're doing an individual book, because of exactly that, right? Not everybody can just write out their favorite piece and why and an opinion piece. There's so many other ways that you can present that information that are really fun and gives them the choice. And at the end, I have like, you know, come up with something better. If you've got a better idea, go ask your teacher because maybe there's an idea I haven't thought of here, right? There's always that other option. Well, could I present this way? And teachers love that because they want to give the kids choice, but there's not always the resources out there to help them determine, well, how can I figure out what are the different choices I could give them?
Absolutely. I love that. That sounds like such a neurodivergent affirming
Yeah.
activity. And I agree with you. It can be really overwhelming. Like you don't have to give choice on everything. That's not what I'm recommending. But yeah, like you said, figuring out where you can give choice, even if it's just two or three choices, that can be really powerful. If there's one book that you always teach, maybe seeing, is there another book that deals with the same theme where I could have two different book clubs going on? Or if there's a research project and you can identify three different topics that students could get into that address different areas of interest. A few little tweaks could really help with that. Another thing I love is visual prompts. So, and this is a great one for parents as well. So if there is some expectation you have, whether that's how, this is a great one to use for their bedroom.
Okay.
If you want their bedroom to look a certain way, one thing that can be challenging is if you go say clean your room, that's actually super vague. Let an ADHDer and a lot of kids actually would benefit from knowing that means I don't see anything on the floor except for the furniture. That means all of your clothes are on hangers and they're in the closet. That means your trash is in the trash can and then you empty it. And again, this seems like too simple, but it is something that needs to be taught. And if you go through it, you will get better results because if you're frustrated by this, it means that their room's not clean. So let's figure out something that's going to help them. So one thing that can really help is help them, show them what it means to have a clean room. Take a picture of their clean room, and
Love
now
that.
they have a visual reference. This also works great with backpacks. So kids who struggle with their books are in there and there's papers crammed in there and their lunchbox and who knows what else, broken pencils at the bottom. Having a picture of, just the binders, maybe the lunchbox on the outside, no trash in there can be really helpful. For older students, this might look like if you want their papers to be set up a certain way, like a certain font and a certain font size and like a certain header, having an example of that is very clearly posted where they could reference it all the time. Or if you have them set up their binder in a certain way, having an example that they can actually look at. You can also even consider this when you're giving instructions. So for example, if you're a science teacher, having written instructions for a lab, having giving those instructions verbally, and then having some sort of visual component, like actually kind of demonstrating some of the things that they'll be doing in the lab. And yes, that takes a little bit more time up front. Take a video of yourself doing that, and then you can use it for as long as you use that lab year after year. And you can also show it to, if you're teaching the same class, take a video once and you can show that to your classes throughout the day.
Absolutely. I think teachers underestimate the power of saving resources, like creating resources that can be used over and over again, especially videos. Videos is a really good one. If you are on Google Classroom, I mean, that is something you could just post on your Google Classroom and it's there all the time for the kids to look at. Or any visual pictures that you take can also be posted in your classroom, and they can be there, year after year. So I do love
Absolutely.
the idea of the visual prompt. I think sometimes we do underestimate the power of a visual prompt. We're so used to a written prompt, or a verbal prompt that, yeah, I really, really like that idea. Awesome. All right, next.
I think something that I have really loved using in my own coaching is to help students lean into their strengths as a way to help them with their struggles. So, again, this works for anyone, but for a student with ADHD, especially, they may say something like, oh, well, I'm just so disorganized. Like, there's no way I'll be organized. I can't do this.
Right.
Whenever I hear a student say, I can't do this, that's when I get really intrigued, because I'm like, I'm going to figure out how you're going to become convinced that you can do this, because I really believe that they can. So, one of our students who was having an organization problem, we knew they were really into video games. There was this one video game they had where they actually had a very organized bin of tools. So, like, it was very clear to them, like, where each tool was, and it was set up in a way that made sense to them based on when they needed to use it. And that's highly organized.
Yeah.
So we talked about that, like, okay, how did you organize this? And when, we talked about them organizing it based on how often they use the things. Okay, cool. That's a clue that we're going to set up your desk at home or your locker at school based on how often you're using certain things. Let's put out things that you're going to be using all the time. Again, the neurotypical image of a functioning desk is probably something that doesn't have a lot on it, and it looks super clean. But it's okay if you want to have things on your desk, as long as it's a system that works for you. So, like clear boxes where people can easily see what's in them. Maybe having some clear boxes of pencils and having their calculator out and having paper. That's all okay if that's what works for them. And then they can see that actually I can be organized when I do it based on the system that works for me.
Yeah, no, that's true. Very true.
And the last strategy that I really love is something that we've been talking about already, which is modeling and giving time in class to actually apply those skills. So, things like, if you want kids to put a paper in a certain place in their binder, actually leaving time for them to do that, leaving a little bit more time than you actually think is necessary for them to clip that into the right place in their binder. Because often as a teacher, I would sometimes realize, like, oh no, the class has gotten away from me. We're having to rush to the next class. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, put this in your binder. Some people are going to do that. And then some people are going to like stuff it down in their backpack and it's never going to be seen again. So just building in a little bit more time. Again, I hate to say it because as teachers, we don't have enough time. However, I think of it as an investment of time, because honestly, yes, I'm going to have to take 3 extra minutes. Or if I want them to write down that they need to study using flashcards tonight, I'm going to have to take an extra 5 minutes for them to find their planner or open their calendar or whatever they're using. However, that's going to save me the time of, marking wrong answers on a test,
Yeah.
or having to reteach the material because they weren't able to effectively study. This is me helping them build those skills for success, and it's going to lead to better results.
Yeah, I think also like polling your class. If you've got specific students who are incredibly organized, right? Asking, what are your top tips for staying organized, right? And then helping, other students to see how they do it so that they can try their own strategies and see what works for them, and just discussing, why it's so important to be organized and to, have the time management. I mean, for me, I love the Pomodoro timer. Have you used it before?
Yes, and that's actually a super effective method for ADHDers as well.
Yes, I also introduced it to my friend who teaches grade 7 for her students, because um it just, I think, helps. The music is designed to, first of all, keep you focused, and knowing that that break is coming. It also helps with seeing, if you can get the one on the YouTube with the actual countdown timer. I think sometimes students don't really know what 10 minutes of time when you're working sort of looks like, or 25 minutes of time looks like. So by putting the timer on, I feel like it can keep kids focused on what they need to do. It's something to try anyways. It's definitely a strategy for sure. And lastly, Caroline, how do you stay positive? Okay, because we're talking about positive mindset. And what advice would you give teachers today to help them shift their mindset into a more positive space? Because I know a lot of teachers are struggling for a variety of reasons. And I know it might be difficult for them to come into a positive space, but there are strategies they can also use. How do you stay positive, and what advice would you give them?
So I know I'm going to share another favorite quote later, but a quote comes to mind for me,
Okay.
which is from Adrienne Marie Brown. And in one of my favorite books, Emergent Strategy, the quote is something like, "Who we are in the small scale is who we are in the large scale." So if I notice myself becoming frustrated or demoralized, one of the quickest ways to bring me back to center is to focus on being positive in super small ways. So that might be if I have my next session with a student of mine, I'm going to really focus on being super present with them and giving them my full energy in that first 5 minutes, really asking them how their day was, focusing on connecting with them. So if I could see this in teaching as, if you're feeling overwhelmed because there's some big changes going on at your school, figuring out what can I do in my classroom to just keep things the same for right now and help people feel like that sense of continuity. And that might be starting your class the exact same way every day. Finding those small moments to create positivity. Like, one thing that I would do is before each test, I would show my class a cute animal video, or if we didn't have time, maybe just like cute animal pictures. And it was such an instant mood boost for everyone and helped
It's
alleviate
a
a
good
lot of the
idea.
stress
I
going
love
into the
that.
test.
Wish I had done that.
And for each person, it's going to be a little bit different, but maybe figure out, like, what are those little mood boosts for you and how can you incorporate them into your day? Think small, because if I get too off track, like if I think about what school is like for most neurodivergent students each day, that's just depressing,
Yeah.
because there are amazing teachers out there. There's also just a lot of cards stacked against these kids that makes school just not a fun place to be. And if I think about that, the enormity of the problem, then I'm not going to keep showing up and doing what I need to do. So yes, I'm working with a small group of students right now. Our company, I have 3 other former teachers who work with me, and total right now we have about 85 clients. And if I think about 85 in the sea of how many millions of students who are impacted, that feels like a drop in the bucket. And
Mhm.
yet I know that by doing what I can to connect with these students and help them connect to their best selves, that's going to have a ripple effect
Right.
because who I am in the small scale is actually going to have a ripple effect to the large scale. When they become parents one day, they will have some of these strategies that they can pass on. When they're at school and they see another friend who maybe I don't work with
Yep.
or who doesn't have access to coaching, like they can share some of these strategies with them. So for teachers who are feeling like it's all too much, I would say like just really recommit to your classroom and that will have a ripple effect outward.
Yeah, just remind yourself, I think every day that you are changing lives, every single day, and by you changing a life, other lives will be changed just through that ripple effect. You have to, yeah, sort of come back to your why and really try to look at what are you in control of and what are you not in control of? Is it worth frustrating yourself over something that is beyond your control, rather than focusing on something that will maybe bring you joy in the long run or in that moment, especially. So yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And just some final thoughts, Caroline. Are there any books that you recommend for personal or professional development?
I love books, so absolutely. One that I already mentioned, equity centered trauma informed education, definitely pick that up. It's been so influential in my own practice. Powerful teaching is another one I love. It's all about two really science backed strategies for students remembering information. Um, and what I love about that book is one of the authors is a current teacher, and the other one is a current professor who's actively teaching.
Okay.
So you've got a middle school teacher, college professor, and they really go behind like the neuroscience of learning and remembering information. And because they're teachers, the tips they have about how to infuse this in their classroom are really they're tested, and they're also not going to be like pie in the sky like
Yeah.
ideas that won't actually work in practice.
Right.
So and they're also easy to implement. They've really tried to make it easy to implement. So I love that book. And then finally ADHD 2.0
Ooh,
is a
okay.
great one if you want to delve more into learning about ADHD. It's written by um, one of the authors is not only a doctor but also has ADHD himself. So I love when you can learn from people who have the lived experience as well as the professional expertise. And so it's a great read.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're definitely going to put those in the show notes for sure. Do you have a favorite quote?
I have a new favorite quote that I discovered recently. So I recently went to visit a great aunt of mine outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and Louisa May Alcott, the author of Little Women,
Oh.
her childhood home is there. And I was walking through the gift shop and I saw this quote that I initially did not like. But then
Okay.
when I learned the story behind it, now I love it. So the quote is hope and keep busy. And that's sometimes attributed to Louisa, but I think it's actually from her mom, Abigail.
Okay.
And the reason I didn't like it is because I thought keep busy. That seems like it's really emphasizing hustle culture, and I don't like that. But as I went through and watched the video and went through the rest of the museum, I realized it actually meant something a little different that is really in alignment with how I like to live my life. And essentially, what it means is hope, like stay optimistic
Oh.
and keep busy, like keep doing the work in a world that is not yet matching what you know it can be. So I think
Oh.
this is an awesome quote for teachers because I know many of us envision a different world, a more equitable world. We have to see our students go through things that really break our hearts. And yet we have to stay hopeful in the face of that and just keep doing what we know is going to create the world that we want to see.
I love that. What a great, great quote. Oh, that's fantastic. And what three things, Caroline, are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for all of the amazing teachers out there who are in my part of the world are gearing back up for the school year.
Yep.
I'm so grateful for what they do every day for students and for my students when they share the great teachers who've had an impact on them. They do talk about it with me, and so you are making a difference, and I'm super grateful for that. I'm grateful for my family. I just had a little nephew born last week, and I'm
Oh,
going to go
congrats. Cute.
thanks. Get to see him and my nieces this weekend and the rest of my family. And I'm also grateful for the outdoors. And I've been spending a lot of time by the ocean lately and grateful for that, which helps me keep a positive mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I love, I'm also close to the ocean. I just love it. It's such a boost. But whatever nature you're close to, take advantage. I mean, even if it's a park or anything, it's just so important to get out into nature when you can. I'm a huge advocate for that. Well, Caroline, I just want to say, like, I'm just so grateful that you came on the show today. I've learned so much, and I know our listeners have as well. And I just really appreciate you for your dedication to, helping all of these students, like past, present, future, to develop skills that will create a ripple effect and help them and people they love thrive in life. Yeah, and I just wish you incredible success and prosperity as you move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Same to you.